We are all concerned these days with the development of nuclear energy. We have learned already that it can do a number of nice things, and also a very great number of desperately dangerous things. We have no way at the moment, apparently, of applying some form of universal ethics to research in this field. And we do not know whether or not the energy resulting from nuclear fission has any built-in protections. Probably the major built-in protection was that it did very little damage to us until we discovered how to release this energy by a more or less equal division of a heavy atom. From that time on, we have been in trouble. The energy released has been inconceivable. And the thing that more or less amazes us without very much comfort or consolation is that this energy is everywhere in space. The so-called matter that we have been accustomed to think of as more or less a dead substance is actually completely alive, far more alive than perhaps the more visible indications of vitality that we are familiar with. We suddenly live in a world, universe, cosmos of energy. And working with this presents a great many challenges. And this morning I thought we might try to just kind of ramble along and consider some of the elements and factors involved by means of common examples. Now, this problem of energy seems to tell us one thing primarily, that energy, life, is an internal factor in living things. It is not conferred, it is innate. It is part of the structure of these things themselves, and all living forms live off of their own internal energies. These energies are usually moderately distributed. They come as are needed. There is energy behind the blade of grass, but this blade of grass does not directly lead to any tragedy. It has been directed by inward laws in the use of its energy factor. Everything is using energy in some form, whether it be for personal life or collective social existence. Energy is the great mover of things, both qualitative and quantitative. And we must sometime face the challenge of what to do with it, how to use it, how to prevent it becoming a means of complete destruction for everything we value in life. Now, if we are confronted with a problem such as nuclear fission, we are also problemed with a tremendous need for self-discipline. The individual must recognize that with every opportunity to improve living conditions, he must face the responsibilities inherent in those opportunities. He must realize beyond doubt that the more power he has, the wiser and more virtuous he must become. As long as selfishness, arrogance, violence is associated or are associated with nuclear fission, we are going to be in desperate danger. In other words, we have now made a discovery that can be only handled if we grow up as living things and become responsible, intelligent, constructive, and conscientious in the use of the resources that we have developed. Otherwise, these resources are going to turn on us with frightful consequences. It's probable that, therefore, that the development of the nuclear energy field is not only most closely involved in our ethics, but without proper internal maturity, we're going to be in very dangerous situations. Now, this brings the other side of the coin into focus, something to do with internal disciplines. And here we think in terms of Zen for a moment. Zen is an extraordinary Eastern philosophy. It is built primarily upon Buddhism. It is also, however, deeply involved in the cosmological and anthropological philosophies of the ancients. Zen is a method of controlling atomic energy inside of ourselves. We are constantly calling upon nuclear fission for existence, but it is done in a very slow, gentle, and non-belligerent way. We release energy according to the disciplines which are imposed upon physical structure. If we release energy too rapidly, we are desperately ill. If we do not release it rapidly enough, we are languid and inadequate. Also, however, we realize that energy is constantly operating in our conduct. For one thing, for example, if we overdo or overtax and use more energy than we are able to supply or provide, we are not well. If we waste energy, we are also sick. So Zen has been set up as a discipline of character. We have never previously associated it with nuclear fission. But there is something about it that reminds us of the tremendous energy factor not only behind matter, but behind consciousness and intelligence. There is a mysterious illumination process which is more or less similar to the fission of an atom. There is a tremendous power of spiritual energy locked within the psychic atom of man. This energy he has never learned to use properly or correctly, except possibly for a very few great teachers of past ages. The development of man's consciousness resource, like the development of his energy resources, this resource has been exploited, misunderstood, and profaned. Man's consciousness was given to him for a reason, and that reason was not conspiracy. He was not made to be a thinking creature in order to outwit his neighbor. He was not created with faculties to understand and comprehend and then bind them entirely to the profit system. Man internally is misusing his resources, and this in turn has a direct effect upon his health. Now, if we take the individual and kind of look him over in terms not only of philosophy but of science for that matter, we discover that each person is a cosmos in himself. There are probably as many living entities within each human body as there are creatures living upon the earth. Billions of minute living things cooperate to make the common function of man possible. These minute things become divided, so to say, into races, nationalities. They are given locations, continents. They are nourished. They have their own system of growth and reproduction. They are also able to cooperate in some strange, or probably psychic way with all of the needs and problems of the body in which they are involved. Possibly, we do not know, possibly to these little tiny microscopic entities, man as a composite being might be regarded as a god. Maybe he is the great over-being that is expected to control wisely and lovingly this vast habitation of creatures which he calls his body. Here he has a tremendous responsibility because he is capable in almost any phase of his existence of forgetting his duties and allowing his body to suffer as a result. If this deity, which we call human spirit, is a just and proper overlord, it will protect the body. But if it is subject to evil habits, if it becomes involved in narcotics or alcoholism, the body as a whole is under a tyranny, a despotism, an anarchy of the ambitions of a person paid for by the destruction of millions of lives which have been given to him to assist in the functions of correct conduct. Now, Zen approaches this matter on a very severe, but perhaps a very reasonable way. In the first place, it begins by pointing out that all excess endangers integrity. Now, this excess can endanger mental integrity, emotional or physical integrity. Wherever the individual loses control of his own conduct, wherever he breaks or whenever he breaks the natural rules and laws of health, he is a traitor to the vast empire within himself. And this empire has ways of revenging itself. And this usually takes the form of physical debility, disease, and perhaps premature death. So the individual has a responsibility to use the energies which are provided to him from the infinite number of small energy units within his own body. If some of these units run away, we have types of disease which can prove to be fatal. If these different units do not cooperate, we have a whole group of mental, emotional, and physical symptoms which must be met, or else the compound will be dissolved. Now, the purpose of Zen is not just to hold the parts together with a kind of mucilage of some kind. The purpose of Zen is to keep the harmony of the body, to protect a good government. The Zen factor in our consciousness is what is intended to be the just ruler, the wise and careful leader, more or less ordained by divine will. This is the part of ourselves that rules the rest by the divine right. It is the king in us, and we are the consequences of its conduct. To begin with, then, Zen may start by recommending the simplification of life, to save the individual from wanton waste. Now, we think of waste very largely as a physical byproduct of activity. We think of waste as something that must be removed from the system or found in some way disposed in the community. But actually, what we are really concerned with is the conservation of the life factors by means of which our length of life is largely determined, and also the quality of that life in its relationship to its environment. The moment the individual ceases to be serene, in that moment he becomes dangerous to himself and others. Now, we know that most persons are suffering almost constantly from small naggings, from minor things that happen that distress and annoy them. Zen is a discipline to recover from these unfortunate factors. The purpose of Zen is to smooth out, to make even the way of life. Now, this does not mean to make it monotonous. It does not say that we cannot have constructive emotions or mental activities, but it means that negative, destructive releases of energy are dangerous. It is just as dangerous for the individual to have a temper fit in terms of his relationship with the lives within himself as it is to have some foreign nation release an atomic bomb. Anything which destroys balance, which destroys life or misuses it so that it becomes self-destructive, is working a very great hardship not only on his own body and his own life, but upon the community and the world in which he lives. Therefore, it becomes very important for the person to realize that wisdom, in a sense, is a way of life. It is not a mental activity alone. It is the power to discipline conduct by intelligence. Now, this is something we all need, but in order to attain this, it is sometimes necessary to secure special training in such a process. We know that our educational system does not teach us self-discipline. It simply creates habits. It causes us to descend or hide ourselves behind a single attitude and remain behind it as an economic factor as long as we live.